8 months pregnant. She built her shelter from fallen logs until the mountain man said, "You don't have to fight alone anymore." Absaroka Mountains, Уайминг Тертаури. Late November, 1887. Winter arrived early and without mercy. It settled into the high ridges of the Absarokas like a living thing, heavy and hungry. Went out through the trees with a savage howl, sharp enough to slice skin. Snow smattered the forest flower, already knee deep where no trail had ever been broken. Nancy W. slammed her shoulder into a fallen log, her breath bursting out in raw, white clouds. Sweat froze at her temples almost the moment it formed. 8 months pregnant, she moved slowly, her body worn down to its limits but her will refused to collapse. Exhaustion on her muscles, not her spirit. The shelter she was building barely deserved the name. Four uneven log walls leaned together, gaps wide enough for the wind to scream through unhindered. The roof was nothing more than a stretched canvas tarp, weighed down by stands and sagging dangerously at the center. Snow clung to the edges, slipping through the corners like a quiet thread. With a strained grunt, Nancy dropped the log and leaned against the frame. One hand pressed into the small of her back. The other rested over her swollen belly. Her coat hung open not by choice. She simply couldn't bother it anymore. Her fingers were crooked and split, raw from cold and raw burn. Her lips had turned a dull purple. Still, she didn't stop. She looped a rope round the next log. Her hands shook violently. The knot slipped. "Damn it," she muttered, teeth ring. The wind rose again, cruel and relentless. She leaned forward, dragging the log inch by painful inch toward the wall. Halfway there, she stopped to breathe. The baby shifted land hard inside her, a sharp pressure that made her soak in air. Something tightened deep within her. She ignored it. Reaching for the timber again, she sensed movement along the tree line. A shadow separated itself from the forest. A man on foot, broad-shouldered, wrapped in a long fur coat, dusted with snow, stepped silently into the clearing. HB's boots crunched softly. Nancy froze. Her hand flew to the resting nearby. The man lifted both hands slowly, palms open. HB's voice was deep and steady. "I don't mean you harm." She didn't answer. Her grip on the tightened. He moved closer, carefully, stopping beside the sagging beam she had been struggling to lift. HB's gaze flicked briefly to her swollen belly. Without a word, he crouched, gripped the log with one hand, and lifted it into place. Muscles shifted beneath HB's coat as if the weight meant nothing. Quiet. Controlled. Certain. He set the beam into its joint at the top of the wall, adjusted it with practiced easy, then stepped back. He never met her race. "You're doing fine, ma'am," he said calmly. "I only helped once. You don't owe me anything." Nancy stared at him, lungs burning. Snow clung to her lashes. He nodded once, turned, and disappeared into the trees. HB's footprints stretched behind him deep, deliberately erased by falling snow. She stood there for a long moment. Then, slowly, she lowered the axe. Nancy leaned against the cabin wall as her knees weakened. One hand returned to her belly. The baby kicked. Hot tears burned her eyes against the freezing air. She swallowed hard. "I can't do this alone," she whispered to the wind. "But I can't trust another man again." Snow brushed swiftly against the canvas roof. The clearing went still. Nancy closed her eyes, her chin trembling. Winter was far from finished and she was still, unmistakably, alone. When the sun finally crept over the ridge, it did so hesitantly, pale and cold as bone. Overnight, the snow had hardened into ice. Nancy stared beneath a tin quilt, her breath fogging the morning air. Her belly strained against her coat, round, tight, and heavy. She shifted carefully, wincing as the cold gnawed into her arching joints. When Nancy pulled open the cabin door, the world outside stood unnaturally quiet. In the fresh snow lay a rubber sack. She froze. No footprints circled titau the wind could have buried by now. Moving slowly, she stepped forward, her boots crunching over frost. With effort, she knelt and loosened the saddle's ties, her fingers shaking from more than the cold. Inside lay a coil of fresh rope, 18 of lamp oil, a small pouch of Nil's ripped in cloth, and a tightly bundled package dark, dense, and rich with scent. Smoked vnisran. There was no note. No mark. No name. Nancy looked toward the trees. Is this some kind of joke? She muttered, her voice thin and cracking. Only the wind answered, whispering through the pines. She carried the sack inside. That night, she filled the lamp with the oil and lit a tea. Her movements slow, hesitant, almost guilty. She hung the rope by the door. The meat sat untouched for hours before hunger finally won. She sliced off a small piece, chewed carefully, and stirred into the flame as if a tea might speak. By morning, a neat stack of split firewood stood beside the cabin wall. 2 days later, roofing shingles appeared. 10 a wool blanket soft, thick, warmer than anything she had owned in years. Nancy stood in the doorway, the blanket clenched in both hands, jaw tight. Stop pitying me, she shouted into the forest. I don't need saving. The woods remained silent. Her hands trembled as she pressed the blanket to her chest. Later that week, she rode the borrowed mule into town. Her swollen belly made every movement awkward, but she needed flour and salt. The moment she stepped into the general store, conversation died. A stirred. Whispers followed. That's her, someone murmured. Building up on Timberer Creek. Her mountain mines been leaving her as her palace. Strange fella. Nancy kept her chin high. He'd burned her cheeks, but she met no unease. She paid with kinds she'd sold her for to spend and left to eat toward a word. Beyond the ridge, hidden among the trees, Raurn Picky watched. He didn't follow her. He didn't speak. He only made sure she reached home safely. Each night, he saw the faint flicker of firelight glowing through the gaps of her unfinished cabin. Each hands were raw with fresh blisters from the ahe, but he never knocked. Never crossed the line. He remembered HB's fiance's face too clearly. Remembered the storm. The snow he'd sold into our throne. The moment he left her alone to fetch firewood and the hour he would never forgive himself for. So he stayed distant. Silent. Useaful. It was enough until the wind changed. One night, as the moon vanished behind thick clouds, the mountain wind rose in fury. It ripped through the clearing like a living beast, screaming through the gaps in Nancy's walls. The canvas roof snapped and trashed above her, held in place by fraying rope, fighting to stay where it was. A sharp creaking crank out as would strain against the storm. Nancy sat curled tight in the corner, wrapped in every blanket she owned, her breath catching painfully in her chest. The baby shifted like heavy, sharp, demanding. Cold crept in from every side, finding every weakness in the cabin. Then she heard a tea. Not wind. Metal striking wood. Her body went rigid, heart slamming hard enough to steal her breath. Another streaky echoed overhead. On the roof. She forced herself to crawl toward the wall, pressing her ear to any rock crack between the logs. Her pulse thundered. Through the seam, she saw him. Raurn Picky. He balanced on the roof like a shadow pinned against the storm. Boots braced tight as the wind tried to tear him loose. HB Scott snapped violently around him while he drove a beam into place, hammering new nails into what she could never reach on her own. The storm screamed. He didn't slow. WJ, she whispered, her favorite resting against the frozen wall. Are you trying to keep me alive? The hammer stopped for a single breath. Raurn turned HB's head slightly, just enough to show he had heard her. He said nothing. Then he lifted the hammer again and went back to work. Nancy pressed both hands to her belly. Tears burned her eyes hot, bitter, unwanted. She hated needing him. Hated the truth settling in her bones. She wasn't sure she would survive the winter without him. The storm did not arrive quietly. It came howling. By mid-morning, the peaks of the Absaroka range vanished beneath bruised, churning clouds. The air turned sharp and electric, thick with the smell of snow and danger. Nancy glanced up from the creek as the wind shifted, flinging loose flakes into southern, violent gusts. She had gone too far. Farther than usual. Farther than she should have. A small sled dragged behind her, laden with water and a few disparate branches of firewood. She knew the sickness everyone did, but she had waited too long. The wind snapped the trees to life, hurling snow sideways. Visibility collapsed in minutes. The narrow trail dissolved into white chaos. The forest blurred. The sky vanished. The storm wasn't coming anymore. It was already here. Nancy pulled her coat tighter, burying her chin into the fur lining. Her breathing quickened short, shallow bursts. The baby pressed inside her, dragging her center of gravity forward. She stumbled once. Then again. Her boots slid as snow swallowed her ankles. Steady, she whispered, as if the earth could hold her upright. Then the wind roared Lord and she could no longer tell which way she'd come from. Trees twisted into white shapes. Her knees gave out. She fell sideways, hands sinking deep into the drift. Her body shook violently. She pushed herself up, slant clumsy, but dizziness slammed into her again. Her lips were numb. Her vision swam. That was when she saw him. Raurn Picky moved through the storm as if it knew him. Snow clung to Ichbe's coat. Ichbe's head was pulled low. Scarf ripped hair across Ichbe's face. He cut through the white wall and reached her in 4 long strides. "You're off the trail," he said, Ichbe's voice steady and certain, even against the wind. Nancy tried to answer, but her throat burned raw. No sound came. He crouched beside her, one hand steadying her just above the elbow, careful, never touching bare skin. "You're freezing. We need to move. Now." "I lost the pet," she whispered, breath breaking. "I know. Breathe. Stay with me." He reached into Ichbe's coat and pulled out a coiled rope. Ichbe's hands moved fast and sure as he tied one end around her waist loose enough to breathe, tight enough to hold. The other end he secured around Ichbe's own body. Then he made her raise for the first time. "Don't let go," he said. And together, they stepped back into the storm. "Why?" she asked softly. "To keep you from getting lost again." He tightened the knot at her waist. "Hold on to me." They moved forward inch by inch, Raurn cutting a path through the blizzard. Nancy stumbled. He caught her without slowing. She slipped again. He held her upright, never breaking or reaching. Behind them, the mule brayed in panic. Raurn glanced back once and quickly tied the reins to the saddle horn. "Follow," he said. The wind shrieked. Snow crushed in from every side, and then Raurn did something she hadn't expected. He pulled open Ichbe's stick, furling at coat and ripped a tear around her from behind, shielding her with Ichbe's entire body. The cold slammed into Ichbe's back, but he didn't flinch. All frozen and dizzy, Nancy leaned into him. Each step felt like a war. The wind fought to turn them, to bury them where they stood. Her legs buckled again and this time, she couldn't rise. "I can't," she whispered. Raurn looked down at her, Ichbe's eyes dark beneath the brim of Ichbe's head. Without a word, he bent and lifted her into Ichbe's arms. She gasped at the southern warmth of Ichbe's chest, the solid strength holding her. He carried her to the mule, mounted first, then carefully pulled her onto the saddle in front of him. One arm circled her back. The other gripped the reins. He lowered Ichbe's head, blocking the wind with Ichbe's own body. Her head sagged against Ichbe's chest. "Why?" she murmured faintly. "Why do you keep helping me?" Raurn didn't answer right away. When he spoke, Ichbe's voice was raw and low. "Because once, there was someone I didn't reach in time." Nancy closed her eyes, and for the first time in weeks, she let someone else carry the weight. The wind still hissed beyond the cabin walls, but the worst of the storm had passed. Snow clung to the windows like frozen lace. Inside, the fire burned low, casting long, wavering shadows across the timber walls. Raurn stayed near the door, seated with his back against the logs. He didn't step farther in. His presence was quiet, steady like a guard standing between her and the storm outside. Nancy sat at the table, wrapped in every sparry layer she owned. Her body ached. The baby shifted beneath her ribs, a gentle reminder of everything at stake. She watched Raurn through the haze of firelight. "You still here?" He didn't look up. The storm hasn't left. It's just catching its breath. "I mean," she said softly, "here. With me." He glanced at her tan, and the intensity in each face stole her breath. "Because no one should be alone when IT comes back." Silence settled again. Ten Nancy spoke, her voice quiet but steady. "I was married back east. To a man who said he loved me." Raurn listened without interrupting. "He convinced me to leave everything behind. Promised yet built a life in the West." Her fingers twisted together. "After we married, he gambled through my diary, drank through my savings. When I told him I was pregnant, he panicked. Told my family it cheated. Said the child hasn't HPS. She stared down at her hands. They believed him. Her voice tightened. My father called me a disgrace. Said it shamed our name. They threw me out. Told me never to come back. I bitterly slipped free. All my life, they wanted me to marry well. And when I did, it still wasn't enough." Raurn spoke quietly. "So you came here to fight for something of your own?" Nancy nodded. "To prove I could make a place in the world even if no one believed I could." Raurn reached into HB's coat and pulled out a small wooden box. He crossed the room slowly and set it on the table in front of her. Nancy frowned down at the box, confused. "Open it," he said gently. Inside rested a encarved wooden mallet, polished smooth by time. The handle was worn where fingers had held it for years, shaped by Usi and care. "She made that," Raurn said quietly. "My fiancé. She carved toys for the children in the valley. That mallet was her favorite tool. Her father gave it to her." Nancy's voice softened. "What happened to her?" "There was a storm," he answered simply. "I went to check the traps. Told her it'd be gone 10 minutes. He didn't say the rest." Nancy's chest tightened. "The avalanche." Raurn nodded. "I dug until my hands bled. I never found her." Silence filled the room again. "Give this to me," Nancy asked at last. "Because she would have wanted to help you," Raurn said. "And because you're building something weird protesting." Nancy swallowed hard. "Thank you." The quiet shattered with 3 sharp knocks at the door. Raurn was on HB's feet instantly. Nancy rose as well, her heart pounding. The door creaked open, letting in a blast of icy air and a man dressed far too well for this place. HB's wool coat was polished, HB's boots spotless, HB's gloves untouched by dirt. A badge gleamed on HB's chest. Gideon Reeves, here announced. Federal Land Inspector. Nancy's voice caught. "Can I help you?" He stepped inside without waiting for an answer. HBS swept the cabin, 10 paused on Raurn. A smug smile crept across HB's face. "Well," Reeves said, "looks like you're not leaving alone after all." Nancy's hands flew to her belly. "You filed this claim under the single residential clause," Reeves continued. "Honors restored development. A man sleeping under your roof violates that condition." "I do not live here," Raurn said, stepping forward. Reeves ignored him. "This claim is now white. It'll be resigned by spring." Nancy's voice broke. "You chant." Reeves stepped closer, stonely and cruel. "You're just a girl playing settler with a hunter at your side. That's not homesteading. Tхats черерти. Хер nis nearligef way. Tears burnt as her voice trembled. This landed solehef. Raurn moved between them. One hand braced against the door frame. Each voice was cold as ice. You took this land over my dead body. Reeves stared at him, eyes narrowing, but said nothing. He turned sharply and slammed the door behind him. Nancy collapsed into the nearest chair, shaking. Raurn remained by the door and for the first time, he stayed inside. The wind never stopped. A thick cloud at the cabin seams, screaming through cracks in the timber as if trying to force its way in. Snow battered the walls toward mercy, and the cold crept from every direction. Nancy lay curled on bedding made of pine boughs and blankets near the fire. Her face was pale, her lips tight. Sweat dampened her brow despite the freezing air. Her breathing came fast, shallow, uneven. It had begun just after midnight. A sharp, deep pain in her abdomen had torn her from sleep. She tried to tell herself it was nothing strange from the day before. A false alarm brought on by the cold but she knew better. She was in labor. 1 month too early. Raurn had seen the fear in her eyes. He hadn't panicked. He barely spoke. Instead, he moved swift, focused, steady, like a man who had faced storms, avalanches, and blood before. Only this time, he was fighting time itself. He fed the fire with fresh logs, packed snow into pots to melt for water. He checked the roof seams, stuffing coal into every gap he could find. When a southern ghost towered the shutters, he grabbed his tools and climbed up to reinforce the rafters. Nancy cried out, clutching her belly as another contraction sliced through her. Raurn, she gasped. It's too early. I'm not ready. Raurn dropped to HB's knees beside her. You're stronger than you think. Her body shook violently. What if I'm not? She whispered. What if I can't breathe? He placed both hands firmly on her shoulders. I won't let you face this alone. The next hour dissolved into blinding pain. Nancy read, clutching the edge of the bedding, her fingers tearing at the raclette. Raurn stayed at her side hitting water, wringing out clots, wiping her brow when a fever crept in. With every surge of pain, each with hand pressed steady against her back, anchoring her. At one point she screamed, raw and desperate. Raurn kept her face in HB's calloused hands, their foreheads touching. Breathe with me, he murmured, each's voice steady, Raurn smooth like stone shaped by years of wind. Match my breath. She tried. It came ragged and broken, sucked with sobs but she followed him. Outside, the storm raged harder. Raurn fed the fire, sticking wood high, wrapping thick pilts along the cabin walls. He spread HB's coat beneath Nancy, shielding her from the frozen floor. Her strength began to fade. Her hands went slack. Her legs trembled uncontrollably. Raurn knelt closer again. Nancy. Her eyes barely opened. I can't, she whispered. I can't do this. Yes, you can. Tears spilled over. I'm so scared. He leaned in, cradling her shoulders. You fought the word to protect this child. You chopped trees. You built shelter with your own hands. You have more courage than any man I've ever known. Her tears fell freely now. HB's voice faltered. You don't have to fight alone anymore. With a final, soul deep CRA, Nancy pushed. 10 seconds. 1 breath. 2. And then a sound broke the stillness sweat. Sharp, rising. A CRA. The CRA of a newborn. Rowan's hands shook as he caught the small, sleek body and wrapped her quickly in his heavy wool coat. Firelight flickered over a tiny, flushed face. A girl, he said, scarcely believing the words. You have a daughter. Nancy collapsed back, sobbing in exhaustion, her eyes locked on the child as her breath caught. Let me see her, she whispered. Raurn placed the bundle in her arms. The cot swallowed the baby whole, yet her tiny fists lifted, warm and alive. Nancy stared down, then looked up at Raurn. You savetas, she said hoarsely. Raurn knelt beside Terem, each with hands trembling now that the danger had passed. No, he said softly. You saved her. You kept her alive. Nancy turned her face toward the firelight. For the first time in what felt like forever, she smiled weak, shaking, but real. Raurn looked down at the child. Firelight gleamed in each bee's eyes, stirring something long buried deep inside him. It wasn't fear. It wasn't grief. It was hope. Spring crept into the Absaroka range like a whispered promise. Snow melted into narrow streams. The air softened, and green shoots pushed through a soil that had known only frost. The cabin once little more than canvas and hope stood solid now. Beams held firm. Shutters blocked the wind. Smoke curled steadily from the chimney. Each morning, Raurn worked beside Nancy. They rebuilt the fence with salvaged pine. Nancy, her baby ripped against her chest, steadied past while Raurn hammered. Afternoons were spent turning soil behind the cabin, planting potatoes and hardy greens. Their HITHM was quiet. Easy. Not lovers. Not yet. But something close. Nancy had never believed she would feel peace again. 10 Reeves returned. It was the second warmth day of the year. Raurn split kindling. Nancy sewed her first row of potatoes. The baby now 2 months old slept in a cedar cradle Raurn had carved, its legs etched with tiny stars and leaves. The knock at the gate was loud and deliberate. A warning. Gideon Reeves stood there, dust-chatted, each baseball head crooked, each base smiled in and to Raurn. Behind him waited several men from town, coats pressed, boots polished, badges flashing in the sun. Well, Reeves said, each eye sliding from Raurn to Nancy, I didn't expect to find this place still standing much less thriving. Nancy rosy, brushing soil from her hands. What do you want? Reeves pulled a folded document from HBS coat and snapped it open. Your land claim was never properly filed. Technically, it's white. That's not true, Nancy said. Reeves smiled thinly. It is now. Raurn took a step forward, but Nancy lifted her hand. She moved to the gate lawn, shoulders squared. I built this house, she said steadily. I gave birth here. You're not taking it. I'm not taking anything, Reeves replied, extending the paper. Sign this. Wow, Croy. Or I enforce removal by law. Nancy's fingers curled at her sides. And if I refuse? HB's voice hardened. Can I remove you by force? Raurn stood just behind her silent, unmoving. He carried no weapon, but HB's stance said everything. She was not alone. This land is mine, Nancy said again. Reeves' jaw tightened. 10 without warning, he reached into HB's coat and pulled a revolver. Sign AT, he snapped, aiming at her chest. Or I will. Boots crunched sharply on gravel. Raurn stepped between the RM. Hands raised. You have to shoot me first, he said quietly. The gun fired. The crack split the clearing. Birds burst from the trees. Raurn staggered as blood bloomed across HB's shoulder. Nancy screamed but he didn't fall. He straightened, jaw locked, eyes blazing. You will not touch her, he growled. Not ever again. Showers rang out from the trees. Townsfolk emerged men and women with alarmed faces. The sheriff pushed through at RM, followed by a land office clerk. They took in the scene at once, Reeves smoking gun. Raurn bleeding. Chaos followed. Within moments, Reeves was disarmed and restrained, accused of assault and misconduct. The sheriff tore the badge from HB's coat and turned to Nancy. Yere Sauri, he said. Your claim will be reviewed and fully honored. As the clearing grew quiet again, Nancy dropped beside Raurn, pressing her hands to HB's wounded shoulder. You're hurt, she whispered. Raurn winced. Evie hit worst. You shouldn't have done that, she said, her voice breaking. I would again, he replied softly. Tears filled her eyes. You can't leave us. Raorn looked at her, truly looked and smiled. Not the guarded ich pression chenu, but something warm and topping. I'm not going anywhere, he said. There is too much left to build. The envelope arrived on a clear April morning, stark white against the dark wood of the cabin table. Nancy opened it with steady fingers, though her heart trembled. Inside was an official document stamped with the seal of the Wyoming territory confirmation of her permanent, legal ownership of the land. She stared at it for a long moment, then placed it beside Clara's cradle. The land was hers. Not through a charity. Not through an inheritance. She had earned it with blood, determination, and help she had once been afraid to accept. Outside, spring beat the mountains in golden light. Snamrl rushed through the creek. Wildflowers bloomed, and birds sang from budding branches. Near the barn, Raorn worked with cedar planks, fitting them together carefully. The scent of fresh shaved wood filled the air. He was building something new, a cradle, not the robust hay to set through a winter, but a polished piece of true craftsmanship. The rails were smooth, insanded. Along the edges, Raorn had carved the stars and pine needles with a chisel that once belonged to HBS late Firenze. Nancy stepped up beside him. Clara rested snug in a sling against Nancy's chest. Raorn glanced at the baby, then back at the cradle. She deserves more than what we could give her during the storm. Nancy smiled softly. You made this beautiful. I wanted her to have something peaceful, he said, each voicela. That afternoon, they placed the cradle beneath the window where sunlight spilled across the floor. Clara slept soundly inside it. Her tiny fist wrapped around a blanket Nancy had soon during long, sleepless nights. Spring settled in deeper, and their agitation shifted. Together, they reinforced their evening with stick beams. Raorn dug a well beside the apple tree while Nancy howled to water. They cleared thorny brambles and turned fresh soil, planting rows of potatoes, squash, and onions. One morning, Raorn knelt beside Clara and offered her each with finger. She ripped her hand round it with surprising strength. Nancy paused in the doorway, watching. Those hands made for a hess and wilderness held her daughter with such care that it stilled something deep in her chest. She's strong, Raorn said, glancing up with a smile. She gets that from both sides, Nancy replied. That evening, Raorn stepped toward the cradle to lift Clara, then stopped. May I? He asked quietly. Nancy froze, her heart tightening. No man had ever asked before. Not her father. Not Thomas. Just Renato. Yes, she whispered. He lifted Clara with both hands, holding her close. The baby made a small sound and tucked herself into his chest. Nancy watched, feeling the walls she'd built from fear and survival slowly soften. In the days that followed, a steadier life took root. They shared meals, planted herbs in clay pots, mended clothes by firelight while Clara could nearby. Raorn never resumed, never pushed. He listened. He stayed. He left space instead of trying to fill it. Nancy found herself loving each disquiet stringed suspicions, each stillness, the way he was simply there. One breezy afternoon, as petals drifted across the yard, she said softly, "You never tried to take anything from me." Raorn met her gaze. "I never will." That night, Nancy tucked Clara into her cradle and stood at the window. The moon hung low over the hills. On the porch, Raorn carved a small wooden horse, each knife moving steadily in the lantern glow. Nancy stepped outside, pulling her shawl close, and sat beside him. The air was cool and clean. Neither spake. Then she reached out Heather Trent, trembling and laid her hand over each piece. Raorn paused, turned each piece upward, and let their fingers entwine. It was the beginning. It was a choice squared, shared, made beneath the stars. The sun dipped low, stretching long shadows across the clearing. Light filtered through pine needles and danced over the face of the nearly finished cabin. It stood solid now, not a shelter, but a home. The timberers were firm. The roof sloped just right to turn Rui Mountain storm the 18 ribbon of smoke curled from the chimney into the spring air. Nancy stood balanced on a beam, hem raised, while Raurn held the final support post steady. The sound of iron striking would rang out sure and evern. There, she said, breathing hard but smiling. The last one. Raurn stood still for a moment longer. He lifted HB's gaze to the cabin, turned back to her. Nancy caught the flickering HB's the same look he wore after long climbs into the mountains, when he searched for something beyond the view itself. As the lights afternooned, they stepped down onto firm ground. Clara babbled from her blanket on the porch, her tiny fists waving happily in the air. Raurn bent to retrieve a dropped tool, but HB's movements were slow now, thoughtful. He glanced at the cabin, turned back at Nancy. "I've been thinking," he said. She raised an eyebrow, tucking a loose strand of hair behind her ear. "That's utterly dangerous." A small smile touched HB's mouth. "You and Clara, you have your land, your home. You don't need anyone. But if there is room for one more set of hands, someone to help with planting, reapers, or to Clara to sleep when your arms are tired," he paused, tended quietly, "I'll be here. If you choose me." Nancy stared at him, her heart beat loud in her ears. There was no pressure in HB's words. No demand. No claim. Just a man standing before her with open hands and tiny face. She stepped closer, holding Clara's neck against her chest, the baby's warm seeping into her ribs. The wind stirred the trees, brushing past them like a silent witness. Nancy looked at Raunot as the man who had saved her. No even the one who had stood between her and Reeves gone, but as the man who had given her room to breathe again, who had waited patiently for her to find her own strength and her own words. She reached out and took HB's calloused hand in hers. "Not because I need you," she said steadily, "but because I choose you." Rowan's breath caught. He lowered HB's forehead to hers, gentle and reverent. The gesture held no words, yet a carried a promise silent, steady, unbreakable. A mountain mineswa. Clara giggled in her mother's arms, stretching her chubby hands toward their boat. Behind them, the cabin door creaked open, letting the last wash of sunlight spill across the threshold. Nancy led the way inside, Raurn close behind, Clara nestled safely between them. The cabin glowed in firelight. Pates hung neatly from hooks. The cradle rocked softly. The scent of pine resin and warm breath filled the room. Outside, the wind no longer howled. "It," whispered. And on that dawn piece of wild land carved from struggle and resilience love didn't drive like a storm. It came like spring. Quiet. Patient. Chosen. Because the strongest people aren't the ones who face every storm alone, but the ones who learn to let someone stand with them. Thank you for riding with us through this powerful frontier of survival, strength, and second chances. Nancy and Rowan's story isn't just about building a cabin, it was about building trust, healing old wounds, and choosing love when it feels hardest to believe in. If this story touched your heart, brought tears to your eyes, or reminded you that even in the harshest wilderness love can still find its way, don't forget to hit that hype button and show your support. And if you want more emotional, slabурn western romances like this one, subscribe to Wild West Stories so you never miss another tale of resilience, redemption, and real love. See you on the next ride down the dusty trail.